Elena Casas. Hello, Elena. What have you got to start off with?
We've got a rare bit of international news on Le Figaro's front page. They're leading on Syria, hundreds of children tortured to death. This is, of course, a report that's a couple of days old now, UN report into what's going on in Syria. But the paper uses their editorial today to call for international intervention in that country, saying that what's happening there is worse than anything that ever happened in Libya. And if we have a look inside, they've got an interesting article from their correspondent in Israel about how much Israel would actually quite like to see al-Assad stay in power there. They, of course, are trying to keep the very delicate balance of power in the Middle East. They're worried he might be replaced by an Islamist government that would not be particularly well disposed towards Israel. And, of course, they're also very worried about what the outcome of elections might be in Egypt, where they're still reeling from having lost their alliance with the Mubarak government.
That geopolitics in that region is particularly interesting, isn't it? Now, moving on to the Eurozone, the latest developments making the front pages too.
Europe gets mixed up in the French presidential election, according to Libération's front page today. Now, they're talking about the likelihood that there will have to be European treaty reform. Though, of course, we've been talking a lot recently about the core Eurozone countries, France, Germany, the Netherlands, coming together and agreeing budgetary and fiscal rules. And that, of course, is what Libération says Nicolas Sarkozy is going to try and sell to the electorate. He's going to try and convince them that either France agrees to go along with Germany's budgetary rules or it's the end of France's social model. But the paper says that could upset quite a large chunk of French popular opinion. Those people who voted down the Lisbon Treaty referendum in 2005, if you remember that, there's always been a chunk of French people who've been really concerned about losing any sovereignty to the EU, both on the right and on the left. So this could spell political trouble for both François Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy, the paper says.
Sticking with politics, the ruling UMP announced its law and order policy yesterday. How's that gone down with the press?
Well, there's some pretty standard tough right-wing rhetoric in it, according to Le Figaro. They say that, of course, they attacked immigration. The Interior Minister saying yesterday there's too much legal immigration in France. At yesterday's meeting in the Rhône area in the south of France, the UMP added to that by saying they're going to impose tougher prison sentences for everybody who commits a crime, especially the young offenders. They're going to be get community sentences from the age of 12, according to Le Monde today. Now, they've taken those propositions and interviewed the former socialist Justice Minister Robert Badinter, who famously abolished the death penalty in 1981. Now, he says that this is still exactly the same kind of old right-wing rhetoric about cutting down on crime that the UMP and their equivalents back in the 1980s were touting when he was Justice Minister. It still won't be effective, and it's still just making the most of people, or trying to exploit, rather, people's fears of crime.
Now, it's World AIDS Day tomorrow. That's already making the front pages, though.
Yes, here at L'Humanité. Their headline is A Social Death, and they've got two HIV-positive French people who've agreed to talk to them inside the paper. Now, they say one good bit of news for World AIDS Day is that people, at least in Europe, are surviving longer when they're HIV-positive, but a bad bit of news is that they're getting a lot of discrimination in the workplace. Both of the people interviewed say that they've lost jobs as a result of employers finding out they were HIV-positive, and that's something that, according to the paper, has happened to 70% of HIV-positive French people.
And a revamping of one of Paris's most famous tourist attractions.
Yes, Oscar Wilde's grave in Paris's famous Père Lachaise cemetery is most famous, as you probably know, for being covered in lipstick kisses that tourists come along and kiss it when they arrive. But apparently cleaning off all that greasy lipstick off of the famous monument is too expensive for the Irish government, which is in charge of looking after the graves of famous Irish people abroad. So Libération reports today they're putting up a big glass screen all around it that's set to be unveiled later today. The paper does say, though, that it's only shoulder height, so if you're really keen to kiss Oscar Wilde's grave, you should bring a stepladder, and then maybe you might still be able to.
Have you made it there?
I have, but I haven't actually kissed it, I must say.
No, I didn't kiss it either, but I did go and take a look. Lots and lots of tourists there when I went to visit. Thank you very much for that look at the front pages of the French press, Elena Casas. Let's now get a reminder of our headlines here on France 24.